Hey guys, it's Vandy. So I'm covering Vanguard Dr. Fossil guys. Joe don't come subscribe. So this time we're covering DZ set 5 for Impauldio. I'm not gonna say final Dustin one because technically speaking, Levy Dross I believe is going up after this, but the final Dustin one that as of the day I'm recording this Sunday, September 29th, 1:59 p.m. that has currently support that we know what they do verbatim. I'm hinting at the fact that we already know that there's an evolved Levy Dross. Anyways, we're gonna start shall we say we got because honestly, like I said with the other two Destin ones that wasn't Leo Odium, I immediately assumed I wasn't going to do Destin ones for DZ set 5, except maybe Levy Dross if it did end up getting an evolve form, which it did. But I didn't expect to do an Impauldio deck profile, and I'm pretty sure I was really harsh on its support like I was with Lisa Phil support. And then after using the start bosses as an excuse to test it out, I actually found the support pretty fun and worthy of doing a deck profile on. So let's get the start, shall we see what we got, because honestly this deck is actually very fun to play, and I feel like the support actually added to the deck's playstyle. First up we have our energy generator, so you know it's our ride deck crest. You remember ride deck crest, your ride deck, auto ride deck. When you drive this card to your crest, with second energy charge 3, continues to have energy bottle begin ride phase, energy charge 3, act once per turn, energy about 7, draw a card. Arm breaks also free 3 energy every turn. Nothing in this deck uses energy. Trying to remember off the top of my head if that statement is true. I'm 95% sure nothing in this deck uses energy off the top of my head. So being able, I feel like I should remember this since the last time I played this deck was yesterday, but pretty sure nothing in this deck uses energy, meaning you can use all that energy to draw a card every single time you charge it up, and we have ways to superior charge the energy, this thing, so being able to constantly ramp up to that is great, and again, you get free 3 energy every turn. If you want to add in more generic energy blasters, go ahead and do that, so one of in the ride deck with the ride deck crest. Then we have our starter in Foul Stator, grade 0, boost 5k, shows okay, base, armor power, so I can draw a card, standard, starter, enough to free draw if you go second. I don't remember if the grade 1 specifically requires this at the starter, but I mean, it's there for the theme anyway, so it's nice to have, so one of in the ride deck, none in the main deck. Following that, we have our trigger in Star Dragon Deity of Infinitude Eldo Breath. Grades of boost 50k, shield 5k, power, over trigger in your deck. When revealed, add trigger move that card, draw a card, choose one moves. It gets plus momentum for the turn, and if revealed during judge check, activate its addition effect, which you get to double the power and critical of all your former units until end of the turn. Increase double power critical when activated. So essentially, say for example, your Impauldio, who has gone off, has given your front row plus 10,000 power, and you're swinging with a 28k Vinch Star, who you then sack the over with. Well, that thing's automatically a 56k, not accounting for boosters or other triggers. So Eldo Breath is all around a very solid over trigger in the sense that if you sack this, your opponent's probably going to die, since you're probably sacking this on a quad or quintuple or even sextuple drive turn where at least one of the units has a crit. You have 8 crits to possibly sack before and after this. Not to mention this thing doubles the critical of everything already on the board. It's like your front row already got plus 10k. Everything is probably swinging for at least 40k without whatever that isn't getting the overpower up. So yeah, Eldo Breath, pretty strong over. If you've played against Brandt in the past, specifically Gravidia, you probably have PTSD from this, and I feel sorry for you if your opponent pulls this down, because I tell you what, being on the receiving end of this when Impauldio is playing it literally reminds me of the Gravidia sack where my friend would say, manifest my destiny and proceed to sack this. Yeah, I still hate those memories, and I hate this deck now because of this, so one of in the right, or not one of in the right deck, one of Eldo Breath for, yeah, that. And move on to our normal triggers. So we run 3 copies of Transforming Heavy, Machinery, Heavy Constellium, grades of boost, fitting, show, 5k power. Okay, run and Pyro here. I do still say you should run a front because, in my opinion, the draw triggers aren't needed since I feel like the deck just wants to kill as quick as possible, which means you're going to want fronts there. Also, to be fair, the deck already has an inherent front build into Impauldio, but fronts for more numbers. If you are going to run a front, please run in Pyro. It's an extra 5k shield. The only reason I don't run in Pyro here is because I do not like mixing archetypes. I say that, and yet this is here, but, you know, we're going to ignore this real quickly, and we'll talk to that one gets the exception. But run in Pyro here. Yeah, I just don't run it because it's a card, no card. But yeah, the 20k shield is nice. But either way, I recommend the front triggers for numbers in the front row. Then we have 8 crits, obviously. 4 copies of Star Aggression Dragon. So grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power. 4 copies of Patrol Robo Decker Cop. Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k power. Critical trigger, auto rear guy on the battle. Boost, shuffle the soul chain, you get to create for the turn. Okay, some decks don't run the effect criticals because they want the 5k booster just in case they have to call it to rear guard. So it makes a difference in guarding. Fair enough. The reason why I run Decker Cop here is because if you get like the soul heavy hand, what I mean by soul heavy hand is you draw all of your soul blasters and then never draw any of your soul charges by some unfortunate miracle of God. Believe it or not, that is capable of happening, especially if you just draw all triggers. So yeah, I run Decker Cop just in case you run into that situation. So 8 crits for pressure, especially when you're have at least 4 drive checks, at least 3 drive checks every turn, but more likely somewhere between 4 and 6 every turn. So there's that. And then 4 copies of our Heal Dragon Blitz Doctor Gensun, grades 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power. So Instead of heal Nuts Powder, you can really run any who wants you to make against them because it was Relstra's heal, or technically it was Ashram's heal, then it became Relstra's heal, then it became this deck's heal. By that same logic, whatever the crit I run for Relstra would be the crit here. The reason why I don't run it here, it's just because, like, Impauldio felt, because the crit was the archetype, and I only put the heal in here by that logic, I was like, you know, let's be fair, so I keep both perspectives on. I'll keep one of the archetypal triggers out, and I'll keep the other one in to keep it in theme with the other decks. So in that case, the heal trigger won over, and then I just like Star Aggression more than I like the heal that I would have put in over the Gunsun. So 4 of Gunsun. Then we move on to our grade 1s, which one of the most important card in the deck, System Code Exceed. Grade 1, this card represents a System Code Exceed token and cannot be put into your deck. It is a set order and contains order zone. You cannot ride grade 3 or greater cards that are not Impauldio units, and you may have a self-modification gauge. What those are literally nothing that just pretty much act as your order zone cards. And then auto order zone, when a card is put into your damage zone face up during your, not face up, when a card is put into your damage zone via any means during your opponent's turn. So it could be by normal damage check, or say for example your opponent had a card that just purposefully put a rear guard to damage zone. Say for example Zion from V-Series that literally on attack would do that. That would still trigger this effect. Choose a card from your drop zone, put it face up as a self-modification gauge, and then if you have 3 or less self-modification gauges and your card other than triggering was revealed for the damage check, choose one Vanguards, get 5,000 power for the turn. If there are 4 or more self-modification gauges, choose one Vanguards, get 5,000 power for the turn. Okay. This ability is confusing, but essentially what this means is regardless if you have the 3 or less or the 4 or more, regardless, as long as you took a damage, put a card into your zone. If you have 3 or less and you didn't pull a trigger, give someone 5k. If you have 4 or more, regardless if you pulled a trigger, you give the unit 5k. So pretty much the thing is if you pull a trigger, you get 15k. If you don't pull a trigger, you get 5k essentially with that one. So Exceed is a good order. It gets you more gauges. If your opponent rushes you and you fill up your drop zone quickly enough, you can get a lot of stuff and basically beat down your opponent on first grade 3 turn, especially if you go second and abuse the hell out of these two. So yeah, System Exceed, the most important card of the deck, because it allows you to get gauges and triggers the entire deck. So obviously this is our card, and thankfully we don't have to put in the main deck because the grade 1 can surge it, because Bushy's learning how to make set order decks focused on set orders. Moving on to our grade 1s that are normal units, 3 copies of Headway Router Dragon. Okay, the only reason things out at 4 of is simply because of the soul. That's it. That's the only reason things out at 4. If it wasn't for that, it would be at 4. So Auto and boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto and placed on rear guard circle. We have an auto mode gauge. Of course, this is the unit that I forgot takes up energy. So this takes up energy. So you might not always use the draw for this, but also sometimes you don't use this at all. So it depends on the situation. But anyways, check top 5 for energy boxing 3. Choose up to one card with a different card name from this unit in grade less than equal to your vanguard. Call to rear guard and shuffle the deck, as long as you have at least one auto mode gauge. So essentially, take one. By the way, that's what this is. Self modification, auto mode, is the same thing. So anyways, take 1 damage automatically, then becomes triggerful. And then auto rear guard, when this unit boosts, if you have 5 or more auto mode gauges, soul blast 1, get 5,000 power for the battle. Okay, 13k swinger, or sorry, 13k booster doesn't seem too bad, especially because the soul blasters actually fill up the drop zone. See, I always thought it was weird that they had soul blasting support, but the fact that the soul blasters can help fill up the drop zone, which gives you more gauges for this, all around pretty solid. 13k, like I said, is not bad. It does end up making you a board with its own skill as long as you have energy to go with it, and it can be superior called via something like Impauldio and still go out, because that's be placed from hand specifically. It can be placed from deck anywhere. It just has to again be not called by its own ability. So they have Headway Router Dragon. All around very solid. We're gonna have, nice to have it. Then we have 4 copies of Destination Mutant Mine, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto rear guard, and valid as unit boosted. If your orders want to set order in it, put the card to your soul. You can counter charge 1 all around, pretty solid. It's just at the end of the battle boosted, get a free soul, get a free counter charge. If you're running into a soul problem because you're spamming this thing and Nebula Invoke 24/7, it's nice to get soul. And in case you're running into a CB problem because you're using your 2 CB cards very interchangeably with every single interval you can, and you're getting damage starved, it's nice to get that CC back. So for Bubble Mine, it's funny how like every deck gets a counter charger, and yet I think Brandt has never gotten like an archetypal counter charger simply, or like they've never got like one that specifically only works for their archetype, because they immediately had Bulbamine from set 1, so literally none of Brandt needs it unless they're playing a very CB heavy deck. So for Bulbamine, very good grade 1 to have. That's why Granzel doesn't get a counter charger, because it costs 2 CB, and then they eventually got a card that just reduced the CB by 1 anyway, so take that as you will. Then we have 4 copies of Spacewalk Dragon, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto rear guard, boosted if you have 2 or more self modification gauges. Again, auto mode gauges is the same thing. I just chose not to update it on slides because I just A, I forgot, and B, I was too lazy. Shove this unit to soul, 2 of your opponents with grade 1 less rear guards, murder it. Okay, cool. It's very simple. Once you get 2 gauges, I mean, once your opponent hits you twice, essentially, you can be able to snipe any of your back row rear guards. It's kind of annoying that it only suits grade 1 or less, but you know, if they have grade 1 or less in the front row, grade 1 or less in the back row, kill them if they're playing a DZ set start, boss, and they have those grade 1s that have 5k get 5k shield and can intercept from back row now. You can just use this to snipe those, and again, it gets you souls, so you can spam more with your double dragon card. So for a spacewalk, very simple grade 1, very nice to have it. I do love how this deck has just like 3 really good dragons that all work really well together. I don't know why, they just have good synergy. Moving on, we have 4 copies of Gatherer 22, Gatherer 2-2, one of the 2. Anyway, one of the 4, whatever I said. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, continues rear guard during turn. If you have 4 more self-modification gauges, give plus 10,000 power. Okay. That is absolutely busted, because Impauldio already gives the entire front row just, you know, a good chunk of numbers, and from that number alone is plus 10 to the front row. But, you know, this thing being able to be an 18k just from your opponent swinging at you 3 times or 4 times. Let's just say this: you discard 1 for ride deck, that's 1 card in drop zone. You guard 1 attack, that's 2 cards in drop zone. You discard twice more, or like for a ride deck, or you discard at least 1 more for ride decks. So you're at 3. Then you guard another attack, you intercept, you do whatever. You automatically have 4 cards in drop zone. Your opponent hits you enough times to get all those gauges in there. Boom, 18k. First grade 3 turn, while your opponent's at grade 2, because it doesn't require the opponent to be at grade 3. Gatherer 2-2 is an amazing card, and this deck has a lot of beat stick potential if your opponent attacks you openly. And from a player that just likes to take attacks willy-nilly and go to like 4 to 5 damage, okay, not 5 damage unless it's have to, but like goes to 4 damage early on, yeah, being able to jump those self-modification gauges and beat the hell out of your opponent with this is pretty nice. So 4 of Gatherer, just good beat stick to have, and ultimately will be the death of your opponent if it comes down. Following that, we have 4 copies of Strong Arm Conversion Strong Arms, so grade 1 boost is 0 souls, K base contains Sentinel, air to 4 Sentinels in the deck, cards put on guard circle, choose on reads, it cannot be hit on the battle for hands from a card, 2 card, this card is standard PG, nothing too special about it. Basically means if this is only word a card hit plus on guard circle, you don't have to discard. One's great, because that means you can be as aggressive as you want in the early game, spam the ever-living hell out of all of these grade 1s, and then when your opponent eventually counterattacks you, because maybe you've gone down to 1 or 2 cards, and they know this is the only time to kill you, because once you get to grade 3, this card is going to give you God knows how much numbers on the defense, especially when you're sacking defensive triggers, which this deck does so well. You can just throw this down, give your opponent the middle finger when you don't discard, and you are good to go. All around, Strong Arms is a very solid PG to have. You could run Violate Dragon, you could run Planet Wall Dragon, because they all have the exact same skill. I choose to make it this card because, like I said, in the other DZ set start bosses, and the kind of alluded to with the triggers, this card came out close to the time of Astrum's release. Since it was Astrum's PG, it eventually became Welstra's PG, though I don't remember if I made it Welstra's PG because Planet Wall Dragon was technically Welstra's. I know at least one of the builds had Planet Wall as the PG, because I copied it from OG Welstra, but it technically became Welstra's PG, and then it became this deck's PG because it belonged to the Fated One, and this was meant to clone the Fated One trigger and PG lineup pretty much. So for Struggle Arms, very good PG to have. Again, run wherever you want. Nice 4-0. Following that, we have the grade 1 of the ride line, so Ion Proget, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto placed by riding from any grade 0 unit. Cool. So this card is just auto screwed over in premium because you have to G-assist for it, but outside of that, just reveal a grade 3 Impauldio from the ride deck, that's the other reason it'd be screwed over in premium, and put a system Codex C token to your order zone. Okay, any grade 0s, this is no longer required, but I mean, you're probably going to run anyways for theming, but cool. Free set order. One of the best Brandt Gate grade 1s, in my opinion, if not the best Brandt Gate grade 1, because it doesn't require you to search your order, which is integral to your game plan, and just makes it a singular token that it just gets a superior search for. One of Ion Progret. Very solid card. Don't need a rear guard skill. Good in my book. It also has a sword, which makes it another good in my book. Following that, we have 4 copies of Nebula Invoke, who I did not like before, and then after realizing that the Soul Blast was there to help fill up the drop zone, I began to like this grade 2 a lot. Grade 2 inside 5k shield, 10k base, auto rear guard when it attacks and anything. Soul Blast 1 get 5,000 power for the battle. The best part is that doesn't require gauges at all. That is, it swings into anything. So you can Soul Blast 1 and have no gauge, and this thing's a 15k swing. That's pretty cool to have. And then if you have 5 or more self-modification gauges, it gets 15k instead. So 25k. Plus, presumably, Impauldio skill, which makes that at least a 35k, plus a Persona Ride, 45k. And we're just going to stop the numbers there, because after that, we have to go into the assumption of triggers, boosters, and everything else. So, 4 of Nebula Invoke. More likely than not, though, this thing is getting boosted by that, meaning that's at least, I think I said 45 before, so 63k. Without triggers. Congratulations. Anyways, all around, very good numbers to have. And I mean, at least it's 25k swing without Persona Rise or anything else. That's pretty good beat stick value. And then continues Guard Circle. If you have 4 more self-modification gauges, 15k shield. See, normally when they do shield value extras, it's sometimes 5k shield or 10k shield if it's a really good card. No, this one's just a 20k shield. This card gets a free 15k shield, making it a 20k interceptor, or a 20k drop from your hand that your opponent can do nothing about unless they randomly snipe it out with one of the very few cards that can make your opponent discard by your choice. 4 of Nebula Invoke. It's really good for guarding, it fills up the drop zone with its Soul Blast skill, and its Beat Stick skill, while it doesn't seem like much because it's only 25k swing, so it only drops a 15k out of it, when you combine it with a bunch of other cards that increase their power by at least 10k, yeah, this card is kind of the best at defensive and defensive grade 2. This card is overall the best grade 2 in the deck, and you'd be stupid not to run this at 4. Then we have 4 copies. Okay, not stupid. You'd be crazy. Then we have 4 copies of Roving Probe. I don't know how to say roaming. Roving Probe. Grade 2 intercept. 5k shield, 10k base. Okay, I used to not like this thing's background, but now that I'm looking at it, I really like how it's just like a simple starry sky, and then like it has like the light orb on its head. I completely forgot what that's called, and I like my mind is going like 20 miles an hour right now, so I can't think of it, and I chopped myself. Anyways, auto drop zone. When this card is chosen by the original act ability of a grade 3 grade Vanguard and Impauldio on the card name, choose whatever units, and it gets 10,000 power for that turn. Okay, so if it's put into the order zone by Impauldio, someone gets 10k. It doesn't have to be the Vanguard, but most likely it will be the Vanguard because the Vanguard zone that doesn't get like good numbers. And then auto drop, okay, good numbers in quotations. And then auto drop zone. When this card is chosen by the original ability of your system code Exceed, Soul Charge 1 or Energy Charge 1. All around, I didn't like how this card, when I first revealed it, I didn't like how this card only worked if it was put into order zone, but now that I tested it, it works really well because if you put it via the Vanguard skill, you're getting more offensive power out of it, and if you're putting it via the order skill, you're getting energy out of it, so you can use more with the dragon or just your energy generator free draw, but also you're getting soul charging out of it, which gives you access to that, and it gives you access to that. So 4 copies of Roving Probe. Very good grade 2. Once it hits the drop zone, it's essentially free game on how you use it, and once it hits your hand, it's your perfect discard fodder. 4 of. Following that, we have grade 2 in the deck, 1 of in the rad deck, none in the main deck of Doris Impauldio. Grade 2 is a 5k shield, 10k base, auto and borrowed palm by a grade 3 card Impauldio on the card name. Put the top of your deck face up as a self-modification gauge, and then choose over your self-modification gauge you may put it to your hand. Okay, I love how that's not a mandatory put, because like there are a lot of games where I will like the way I guard and then the way I take damage, like I will end up with 3 gauges in my 3 gauges before I get to grade 3. Then I ride to grade 3. Doris gauge skill would get me the 4th one. So now it's a question of do I want or not? No, sorry, let me phrase. I'll have exactly 4. Doris will get me the 5th one. Now the question is, do I want to add that 5th one to my hand or like add any of the gauges to my hand and bring myself down to 4, knowing that Impauldio, if I don't, could get me a 6 gauge and give my entire front row 15k, or do I want just to add that card to my hand so I have extra defense power, extra consistency? I do love how Doris adds that little bit of variety to its skill, where most of the time you are going to add the card back to your hand, but if you do want to end up keeping the gauge there for more offensive powers, you are more than welcome to, and it is a free gauge kit, so it's a nice 1 of in the ride deck in my opinion. It doesn't need a main deck skill, and honestly this is one of like the few ride lines where I really like how those skills are throughout the entire ride line, where I genuinely believe they do not need rear guard skills because they are very consistent on what they do. Following that, move on to our grade 3s. 4 copies of Flying Conversion Vinstar, who I still heavily believe that is literally just the Brandt like artwork in the background. They just slapped a giant robot on it and called it today, which I am fine with. It looks badass as all hell. Grade 3 to persona, 13k base, continues rear guard during your turn. If you have 2 or more self-modification gauges, gets 5,000 power. Easiest accomplishment in the world. This literally gets you 1, and this literally gets you the other. So even if your opponent has not dealt you a single bit of damage that entire game, you can still make that an 18k just by playing the game. And then if you have 8 or more self-modification gauges, this unit's drives cannot be decreased by card effects. Why is that effect so important, you may ask? Auto rear guard when this unit attacks at anything if you have 4 or more self-modification gauges. Again, very easy to hit with this deck. No drive checks will perform for the battle. Your rear guard attack this turn, not just in general, so thankfully you can swing with this after the Vanguard swings. CB1, until the end of that battle, this unit performs drive checks, and it gets drive -1 at the end of the battle by this unit. Okay, I wish it sent itself to gauge. That would be really fun, but fair enough. It's a simple CB, it's at least 1 drive check. If you have the 8 or more gauges, you're probably not getting on first grade 3 turn. It is possible to get on first grade 3 turn. I did it once, but that involved very specific setup, and that involved like so much like luck to kind of happen, and I also had to take a lot of risks. So it's possible, it's just not easy, but if you end up getting the 8 or more self-modification gauges, you can make that a twin drive on your first grade 3 turn, followed by the quad drive of this mofo, and essentially beat your opponent down with a bunch of triggers hacking for game. So 4 Vinstar, all around pretty solid. It's 18k on its own. It can get drive checks. It can get non-reduced drive checks. The only downside is if you use one, like you can't call 2 of them and then have drive checks for both, because it specifies that you cannot have done drive checks for the rear guard attack that turn. So you can't do both in a turn, but hey, still a very good grade 3 to have. I love it a lot. I think it's nice, so 4 of. And then move on to the last card in the deck, 3 of in the main deck, 1 of in the right deck of Destined 1 of Exceedance Impauldio. And the card I honestly like the most because unlike every other deck in D, this deck does not focus on multi-attack. It just focuses on making big numbers with 3 units and then proceeding to get extra drives and extra crits out the wazoo. Otherwise, with the Vanguard, it's just a constant twin drive, and that's what I like about it. It's simplistic. It does its job, and it's simplistic at it. So anyways, Exceedance, grade 3 temper, 13k base. Active Vanguard once per turn by C being 1. Choose a card from your drop zone, put it face up as a self-modification gauge, pick any card you want. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose to 1 grade 3 less card from one of them, call to rear guard, circle, shuffle the deck, and this unit gets auto Vanguard. All your frontward units get plus 5,000 power for every 2 of your self-modification gauges to the end of the turn. All around, pretty solid if they end up giving us more ways to charge gauges. Right now, there's only 3, this, and this, and honestly, that's fair enough, considering how broken this deck would be if there was more, considering, you know, this is a thing, and also this is a thing. But being able to just get your entire front row free 5k for at least 2, more likely than not 10k from just having 4, which is very easy to do, is nice for pressure. And the reason why I keep specifying more is because it's Divine Skill. Active Vanguard, if your opponent's Vanguard's a grade 3 guard and you have 4 more self-modification gauges, no other requirements to this, Counterblast 1, Ditch 1, he gets a crit and 2 drives. That doesn't sound like a lot when you just look at the fact that he's a 13k base, but remember, you're most likely to have used this skill that turn. This is at least 23. And again, that may not sound very impressive, but remember, something very important. This can be done on your first grade 3 turn if you go second. Meaning on your first grade 3 turn, if you win second, your opponent maybe has 1 turn of setup, depending on what deck they are. They either pretty much drop their entire hand in one go, or they have a decent hand size. It just depends on what deck they're using. But you have a quad drive, double crit Vanguard, which consistently can dig through triggers depending on who the person is. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm one of the people that sacks the overs during my drive checks. So there's that. And then you have another rear guard. So they have a total of 5 drive checks with God knows how much power and probably this thing backing them. I'm guaranteeing you now, if you think you are 2 damage or safe, if 1 crit comes down, you're automatically in the danger zone. 3 of Impauldio in the right deck, 1 of in the main deck. Gets power to front row, literally gets you a rear guard, and gets you a gauge, all in the same skill. Not to mention the fact that on possibly even your first grade 3 turn, because this is very easy to get the gauges for. Honestly, the harder part of this skill is your opponent being at grade 3. That's the only hard part here. But, you know, once you get that part out of the way, double crit, quad drive, pressure for game. And that's it for this one. I hope all of you enjoyed. All around, this deck is actually really fun to play. Like I said, I was very critical about the support before, mainly because I was just lazy and didn't want to deck profiles. But Headway being able to make rear guards out of nowhere, so if your board gets nuked or you have to, like, which honestly, that was like one of my struggles sometimes, the fact that I wouldn't call rear guards to board, so I wouldn't end up with boosters. Now I will consistently have a whole back row of boosters. So being able to use Headway to get boosters faster and more consistently, or battle against board nuke decks and be able to get them back, having a bunch of resources to get soul, having a lot of ways to fill up the drop zone for gauges and have a lot of good basic numbers out of it, having a nice cards that help with gauging, and not to mention the fact that you would just have a big beat stick over here on steroids, makes this deck very fun to play. So without further ado, I'm going to end this one here. I hope all of you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join us for this, and I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to set up your Vanguards.